Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Integrity Matters by Turnitin. With me in the house today is Dr. Kevin Argus. Kevin, can you tell us a bit about your background, your work at RMIT, and your research focus?
Thanks, Chooks. Pleasure to be here. So I lecture in marketing and design thinking in the Graduate School of Business and Law at RMIT University, primarily in the MBA program. So I tend to teach into the executive MBA, but have also been involved in teaching in the MBA in both marketing and design thinking. My research interests are really at the nexus of sustainability around social, environmental, and economic sustainability. I guess specific areas of interest around circular economy and shared value.
Oh, wow, that's a wide range. So today we're going to be focusing on embedding or engaging industry partners in designing of courses, online courses, and also authentic assessment. So my first question to you today, Kevin, is why is it relevant for universities or higher ed to engage industry partners in the design of online courses and, most importantly, designing authentic assessments?
Well, this is a question that I'm quite passionate about. Look, impact in learning and teaching has become prominent as we move towards a paradigm of application of research and learning as well as impact. So what we're looking at here is ensuring that there is value that is delivered, authentic learning, that it has currency. We live in times of rapid change, often referred to as a VUCA economy. You know, there's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So by engaging industry partners, I feel that is a paradigm shift towards ensuring that the learning and teaching is not only informed by research, that has a very demonstrable impact on industry. Mm-hmm. And certainly when you design assessment around that, and you engage with industry partners in a meaningful way that services their needs as well as the design of learning and teaching outcomes, then you can achieve that.
Awesome. I'm just wondering, what would you, and I know you've been very pivotal to the design of the fully online RMIT MBA. What would you say were some best practices and potentially lessons learned from your experience and in how you engaged industry partnerships in the design of these courses?
In terms of engaging industry partners, I think, again, it comes down to the question of value proposition. So it's about understanding that if you're going to engage a partner, it's exactly that, a partnership which has two-way value. Mm-hmm. So in terms of best practice, what I do is I seek to align the choice of industry partner mm-hmm. with research interests within our school and among academics who are involved with them. So if I'm engaging them for my course, I'm looking at what my research interests are, how I can collaborate with others with research around a project that might emerge from that industry project. Mm-hmm. I also seed that into the value proposition to the industry partner and say, well, you can get student participation, engagement in projects that provide meaningful artifacts. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, what we can do is we can devise where there is value for you in a research initiative that can help illuminate or help tell the story of some of the really interesting things that you are doing in the space that you're involved in. And examples of that for us are a shared value partnership in the construction industry with a social enterprise and disability, mm-hmm. which is now feeding into an ARC grant application. Mm-hmm. I've collaborated with two other research fellows from my school. Mm-hmm. What that means, I feel, in terms of best practice is you are helping to balance that tension between the need to conduct research, to engage in learning and teaching, and to have impactful industry engagement. Mm-hmm. Designing it around that type of initiative is going to be challenging to find industry partners. So best practice for us at RMIT is the engagement of or the formation of an industry engagement team across the university, college and school level. So some through my networks, because as I mentioned, I come from industry and I'm a bit of a networker. Not all academics are. So we've standardized that by providing industry engagement experts, and they help filter in alignment with your interests and industry interests. And that for us has become a more standardized, successful formula.
Oh, wow. So that is, from me, I'm just hearing win-win solution, industry value proposition as well as institutional value proposition have to be aligned for successful collaboration. I'm just going to piggyback on that. Well, let's look at it from the angle of an institution that has never done this before. What would you say were some challenges when you started out, especially with the online MBA program? What would you say were some challenges you faced in engaging in industry partnership in the course design and assessment design process?
I think one of them is, let's say you mentioned specifically our MBA online, which is an accelerated MBA, as you know. So that's a 7-week program, whereas in the face-to-face executive MBA program, we've got a 12-week program, or 13 weeks if you like. So you've got more time to construct project work that takes time. So if you're going to have a condensed version, you've got to design it for that condensed version so that the deliverables are matching the expectations that you set up. So we do shape or reshape those projects in terms of assessment design. In terms of the engagement, though, as you mentioned, that is a challenge for institutions who perhaps are a little bit new to this. And what I would say to them from my experience of feedback from industry partners I've gone to and successfully negotiated a partner with, some have said to me they have been disappointed in the past with the experience they've had with academic partnership. Now, you know, some people might look and say, well, look, I'm lecturing in marketing, which is very, very practical discipline, you know, very much aligned with research that's conceptual, but it has practical implications. It's very business oriented. But the reality is the value proposition. That's the magic. So I cracked that early on and knew from my own consulting days in consulting, that if you didn't have the value proposition right, you hadn't actually hooked the industry partner from the first meeting. And that meeting might even be a pre-meeting, like a phone call, or for me, it's often, if it was a phone call, I followed up with an email that's got a detailed mapping of how I see that value proposition played out. Typically what I find is that's a differentiator. And then they come back and say, well, this looks interesting. We'll have a conversation. And the meeting already has an agenda focus, which is around something that was mapped, rather than come and talk to us, you know. And from their lens, it might be, you know, they've heard stories or they've had experiences in the organisation, you know, look out for academics. They have a research bias. They will use you for their research interests or what have you. It's not the status quo as generally as it may be once, or we might have went through a period where that was occurring. And it's quite possible that was occurring because there might have been pressures on research output, not balanced pressures on impact. I think this sort of shift towards a focus on demonstrating impact is transforming the landscape, certainly at RMIT.
Yeah, I'm just going to move the lens a little bit. I think you've alluded to this when you were talking about the need for industry engagement experts in universities to help and support the engagement of industry partners. I'm going to assume that we don't have not all institutions have that. So I would pose this question in a different format just to get your thoughts around how institutions would firstly engage industry partners, and how would educators who are in partnership with these industry partners effectively embed that industry experience in designing activities. Is it an easy process? Is it a challenging process?
Well, what's emerged now are these matchmaker services. So you've got these online matchmakers, and what they do, they basically, it's a bit like, I don't know, like eBay or like, any of these sort of matching buyer-seller services, where they will put out to industry and say, look, feed us project challenges that you would like institutions to take into the classroom in whatever course where it fits and solve a problem for us. And at the same time, what they do is they take from the institutions, feed to us the sorts of problems that you would like your students to work on, and give us some scope in terms of what this looks like. And then they do the matchmaking. So we've also tapped into that, and I see for the RMIT online offering that's going to provide an interesting mechanism, then design them in the specifications that we give to the matching agencies, the ability for them to do that matching for us based on a spec. I think it fits very neatly in that particular space. We have a requirement around our EFMD qualification. It was called EPAS, now it's EFMD, and that's around globalization. So we need some international cases, and some of those, one of them's based in Canada and one of them's based in Europe, and we've found the one based in Canada has been performing really well in terms of delivering up to expectations across the university. So I haven't actually engaged in using that service yet, but we're setting ourselves up to adopt that because other schools within the university have had very positive experiences. And again, that comes through our corporate engagement team as a way to engage cases based on specification, and there's a marketplace. So I think that marries with that. Then the other second half of the question really is get that specification to meet the design of what you would deem appropriate. So you've got to unpack it, probably deconstruct it, and say, if you've got 3 assessments, how many of these assessments do you want to be attached to the project specifically? It may be 1, it may be 2. For us, in the context of a 7-week course, it is possible, and we've thought about maybe having a very small aspect. Let's say it was something like evaluating or re-evaluating brand, could be around something to do with an exercise around getting some data and using a process to revisit brand purpose. But we think it makes more sense that if the students invest the time, and so does industry partner, to do something a little bit more constructive and maybe have at least an assessment around it rather than just an activity within a particular topic, and possibly 2 activities. So for us, it makes sense to have a little bit of a exploratory sort of a research component, as you tend to do in a marketing context, and then something around design or strategy. So we can usually get 2 assessments out of it. It's possible you could do a third, but we find 2 assessments sort of make sense. But that's really coming down to what is doable. I would say always get some peer reflection on that, because you can be too ambitious in your design. And I think the problem there is you think you're doing something remarkable, but you might be overtaxing students and just causing stress. So it all chooks, I would say, work with a learning designer and get a sense of what is achievable in a time frame around activities. I must say I'm a bit of a convert to learning design, because the learning designers already have very much that sense, particularly in the online space, of, what is reasonable in terms of activities over the course of a week for people who are choosing to learn online, and then mapping that with your course learning objectives, which fit in with the program learning objectives.
Nice. I think this is a really good segue into understanding what the feedback has been from the students, and how has that feedback from some online courses you've been involved with informed the enhancement of student experience in future projects?
Look, it's most rewarding when you have on LinkedIn somebody who's just graduated and you make a comment and their feedback to you was, working on that project was one of the highlights. So I get that both in person, via email, and then sometimes on platforms like LinkedIn. Students are outside their comfort zone, because if they're dealing with an industry project, often it's outside of their industry. And often they're looking at, particularly with the sort of issues that I'm bringing to play, things around sustainability, they're grappling with them, but it may not be core to their particular role. So there's learnings going on. So I've just come from, prior to this, a drop-in session prior to the first assessment for an industry project we've got around reforestation in East Timor. So it's rather interesting that we've got executive MBA students looking at, carbon credit markets, maybe how blockchain technology could introduce trust and what have you around this. The research they're doing, what they're suggesting is this is really interesting and really insightful, and it's giving them a different lens in terms of how their own organisations are dealing with brand purpose and initiatives around sustainability and maybe the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Some industries have chosen some of those to align purpose or programs with. I also have students who come from having graduated career positions and come back and said, look, what was done in that particular project was really helpful because it mapped out a process. Often in the case of when it comes to a research lens for them in terms of how you explore a problem, moving away from just looking at the quant and looking at different lens and stakeholder lens in terms of how you understand a challenge, which can sometimes reframe for them the problem that is the problem to focus on and solve, rather than just taking it, carte blanche, what the client says or what the industry partner says in terms of their interpretation of the challenge. So I think working with industry partners is a great way to get great student experience.
Yeah, awesome. My very last question today, Kevin, is at Turnitin is our mission to support academics in promoting what we term citizens of integrity. How do you currently support feedback design, feedback literacy, and assessment security in the online space?
Yeah, great question. Look, what you're asking is the intersection of academic policy and procedure and technology. So for us at RMIT, we're using Turnitin as a tool that meets those integrity issues. So feedback is enabled through embedded rubrics, which I think is a great capability, because what it means now is we have clear alignment in terms of our assessment being enabled in a timely manner linked to rubrics, as well as using capabilities like Speed Grader, which gives you flexibility to have in assignment text, to have more general text provided around the assessment appraisal, or the option to have a verbal feedback. I personally prefer rubrics that are comprehensive, and you've got flexibility in terms of how you build your rubrics. So, look, I think academic integrity is half of the core in academia, and having tools that support that is important. In terms of the security, the great thing is that the technology acts as a secure environment that stores assessments so that we can go back to them over a period of time. So if there are any academic integrity issues or any issues at all that come up with student contribution or compliance issues in terms of audits and going back and checking on assessed work and evidence of that, then it forms as a neat repository. It's probably great that it's in a third party space, so that so it has that level of security around it as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Kevin, and thanks to everyone for joining us on this session, which is looking at engaging industry partnerships in design of online courses and authentic assessment. Thank you again, Kevin.
Thanks, Jux. It's been a pleasure.